Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the very expensive Rockstead Sai, and this is the T model. We have this sort of prism DLC coated titanium frame. It's important to note that there is a less expensive version of this just called the Sai that is also titanium, and the blade is a little bit different. We're going to talk about that. First off, thank you so much to Thomas for sending this in for review. I appreciate that. This will, of course, go back to Thomas after I'm done. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex, and if you'd like to check out my Patreon, there's, of course, a link for Patreon right down below. Thank you so much to the people who support me. I will link this knife and the Sai down below so that you guys can go take a look at that for yourself. I will point out when you use my links, it does support my channel, but that is entirely up to you. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this very beautiful and very expensive knife. Overall length of the Sai-T coming in at about 7.5 inches. Overall blade length is coming in at about 3.25. Your cutting edge is coming in at about 3 inches. How about some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2? It's closer to the size of the Rat 2, but it has much more of a presence due to the geometry of the scales and the blade. It feels bigger than it is what I'm saying. Let's go ahead and move on here. How about some size comparisons up against the Spyderco PM2 and Spyderco Para 3? Once again, closer to the size of the smaller one in this group. Last but not least, the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the Benchmade Bug Out. Again, close to the size of the Bug Out, but dimensionally much thicker, much more robust. How about, speaking of robustness, let's go ahead and do carry profile here. This is a knife that runs on, as far as I can tell, large phosphor bronze washers. I own a Rockstead. I own a Higo too, and that's the same case. I don't know. I think there might be some Rockstead models on bearings, but they're not, you don't generally see that. You can see here, it's pretty robust in the scales. I mean, it does taper down a little bit towards the butt end, right? The entire knife has this sort of, you know, thick and then thin, and then it's thick and then it's thin, right? So that's kind of what you're looking at here. Let's go ahead and do length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. So it is kind of a thick boy, but, you know, it's no longer, maybe a little, no, it's no longer than the Spyderco Para 3. And in terms of height, it is pretty tall in this area, but the Para 3 still clears it. Same with the PM2. So it's really just going to be the dimensions that might bother some people. Let's go ahead and measure. Oh boy, it's not going to stand up, is it? Come on, buddy. No. Let's go ahead and do blade stock thickness here real quick. Blade stock thickness, sorry, I was zeroing out my calipers. Blade stock thickness on the Sai-T coming in at 144 thousandths. So fairly thick, not insane, but fairly thick. We are looking at titanium, and then as far as I know, also a countersunk titanium liner lock. Wait. Does it get, oh, it's going after the blade, sorry. Yeah, everything in there is going to be titanium except for the washers. So are we zeroed out? Okay, the weight on this guy coming in at reasonable 4.73 ounces. A little heavy for a knife of this size, but nothing too crazy. There's another thing that's going to keep people from carrying this knife, and some people I'm sure have already spotted it. In fact, I'm sure most of you have. We'll talk about that here in a sec. But yeah, do with that information what you will. Let's see here. Hardware check. We can do a little bit of it. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can get them right down in the section of my description that talks about my tools, along with a whole bunch of other handy stuff that I use on the channel. I believe these scale screws are T6. Oh, they're even smaller than that. Oh, God. I have almost never had to look how good a condition this T5 bit is in, right? Are these T5? Oh my God. Okay, so T5. Yikes. No, those need to be at least T6. Truthfully, T8 would be better. The pivot is completely and totally hidden. In fact, I believe these scales just compress together. you can see it looks like an integral, but it's not. It's actually two pieces of titanium that are seamed almost perfectly together. You can just barely see the seam right there. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. I'm sure it's not that difficult to take apart. Truthfully, you're gonna have to be really careful with the body screws. My Higo, which I'll go ahead and get out for a size comparison if we have some Rockstead collectors watching this right now. My Higo 2, which is a user, a lot of people say, those knives are too expensive and nobody's ever using them. Yeah, they do. Just because you, in an isolated circumstance, are watching a video about a really expensive knife, right? You don't own it or use it, or if you owned it, wouldn't use it. How on earth, how do you come to the conclusion, right, with just that, as far as the ammunition for the argument, just that, you just decide all at once that nobody uses these things? Yeah, people definitely, I use my Higo 2 all the time. I clean it off, right? People point out, well, it doesn't even look dirty. It's because you should clean your knives. It helps preserve them, right? It helps keep them in good shape. Cleaning, stropping, taking care of your knives. Anyways, this guy is real easy to disassemble. I mean, this is like, this is Rockstead's Sebenza, essentially. There's just a couple of very large fasteners. Very, very simple. Love that. This guy, as long as you can get around those teeny tiny heads without stripping out the bit or the screw, and even if you have nice stuff like WIA, you still run the risk of that. So just be careful, because my goodness, is this an expensive knife. I am fairly certain the Rockstead company would take care of you, but this is a knife that is made in Japan. So warranty stuff, yeah, depending on where you live, it might be more or less difficult to get that done. Not my favorite thing in the whole world with the hardware, but it is what it is. Let's go ahead and take a look at this knife, get into the meat and potatoes of the review. Oh my goodness, this is beautiful. Now the standard Sai is just like a blackened titanium, and it looks fine. It has this topographical looking texture, which is really nice. Not as sharp as you might think. It's definitely textured enough where you can get a grip on it and feel that you're gaining the benefit from that texture. But this prismatic or prism DLC, it's sort of a magenta and green that has some iridescence to it. I don't know if we want to say iridescence or pearlescence, I'm not really sure. But as you sort of move this knife around, the hues change and the shadows change. It looks really, really nice. Now, is that adding any benefit to the titanium? Probably not, because titanium is not going to rust by itself anyway. Right? So that's, you know, if you're looking at the Sai and thinking, okay, the Sai is $1,650, and the Sai-T, which is the one we're looking at here, is $1,950. So what am I paying for here? Well, the difference between the two, as far as I can tell, is that we have a Tanto convex ground. Yes, we'll talk about that blade. Now, of course, it's mirror polished. There's a lot of work that went into this blade, right? Let me say factually, Rockstead knives, if you don't know, an enormous amount of work goes into them. These are not knives that, you know, like a lot of people look at this and be like, it can't be, you know, it's probably only a $500 knife or a $200. No, they are undoubtedly expensive to make, right? We're going to talk about the price, but a lot more work goes into something like this than something that's in the $200 to $500 or even the $800 range of pocket knives, right? But we're gonna talk about the price tag on this for sure. And then you also have this Prism DLC finish, right? Other than that, the other difference, the one that's really confusing, is that, you know, what we have here is a 68 Rockwell hardened ZDP 189 blade that has been mirror polished, painstakingly mirror polished. Enormous amount of work goes into that. And so that's where Rockstead knives get their incredible cutting performance, right? A lot of people look up the cutting performance of just the ZDP 189 composition and will see that it falls behind on average steels like M390. This is a different, these types of knives will prove that taking a composition like ZDP 189 and creating a specific geometry and getting that Rockwell hardness way up high, right? And then I imagine the mirror polishing helps glide it through material. Rockstead knives will easily surpass your average, even optimally heat-treated M390 blades on production knives. Geometry and basically the processing of the blade played a gigantic role in the blade's performance. So, if you didn't know, yes, these things will outcut pretty much anything on the market, right now. There are a few things, right? Your tungsten carbide blades, right? Things like that. Maybe some of your S125V, Rex 121 stuff, but we're not seeing that stuff, right? These knives will definitely outcut, and I mean like in terms of longevity and edge retention, they will outcut almost anything in the market right now. But to circle back to what I was talking about, this is ZDP 189. The Sai is VG10 clad, or Sanmai. It's got a jacket of VG10 around it. ZDP 189, it's kind of a confusing steel. Is it stainless? Is it not stainless? I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. A lot of people say it's definitely not stainless. A lot of people say, no, it's right on the line, right? Generally speaking, at 14% chromium, right, is where it needs to be stainless, but you also have to consider how much carbon is in there. You know, a lot of carbon is going to make it not stainless. So I don't know. In any case, the VG10 is very stainless, right? It's also pretty tough. So adding that, you know, jacket of VG10 is going to really aid the already amazingly bolstered ZDP 189 steel, at least Rockstead ZDP 189. This guy, the more expensive one, as far as I can tell, is just ZDP. I would think that definitely on the more expensive one, you would add, I mean, like, that's a more luxurious element, right? So that's kind of weird. I don't know. You do get the Tanto. I don't know if the standard Sai comes in a Tanto and a drop point, or if it's just the Sai-T. Honestly, I mean, for ease of sharpening and maintenance and just, I don't know, cutting performance all the way around, I think I would prefer the drop point. The Tanto is definitely going to be a stronger geometry, so it depends on what you want. But, you know, this blade is incredibly beautiful. I mean, that's a real mirror polish, and achieving that is no easy feat, especially on something like 68 Rockwell ZDP. That's not going to be an easy thing to do, which is, again, part of the reason why these things cost so much money. Very functional jimping, right, back here, up here. I'm sure a lot of you guys have noticed that, you know, this looks a lot like a SOCOM Elite. I own one. Yeah, it actually does. Now, there are obviously differences going on here, right? There are differences in the profile, slight differences, but it's funny how similar some of the lines are. It's a smaller knife, right? It's even got the countersunk liner lock. I still don't think it's a direct copy, but my goodness, some of the lines are definitely close. I'll definitely acknowledge that. Thumb studs are absolutely in the right place. It's very easy to deploy this guy, and the action is very smooth, but again, it's running on phosphor bronze washers, so it's not going to be like that drop shut smoothness that we get on really luxurious bearing knives, right? Or sometimes inexpensive knives with bearings. No, but you can still do like the reverse flick. It's definitely smooth enough to do that, and the detent is very, very good. Nice and click, right? Feels and sounds very good, very solid, very luxurious, right? Edges up here, nicely knocked down. In fact, the blade is just perfectly done. It says Rockstead on the other side, Sai-T, and then some other information. The edge, I mean, despite this being clearly a user, there are signs of this thing clearly being carried and used by the original owner, and I think if I can find it, it's not going to show up on camera. There's a couple of little marks here and there in the blade. Something that's this hard, you have to imagine, you know, unless you're being an idiot and like trying to cut concrete, a blade like this is not going to scratch easily. Even if you're using it every single day, it's really just not. A lot of people say, I'd be so afraid to scratch that mirror polish. You're really going to have to be cutting something stupid or constantly cutting into material that's got staples or something in it to put a scratch on it. Most of the time, you can just clean the blade off and it's going to look like, you know, it's new, like my Higo. So yeah, bringing this edge back to life most of the time is going to be as simple as stropping it. I believe me, I didn't believe that either. I thought, no way, that's going to be such a pain. Now, if you're constantly cutting super hard, dense, aggressive material, then yeah, you're going to have to, you know, I don't know, sharpening something that's convex, right? Instead of a flat grind coming to the apex or a hollow grind, right? It is convex, which means it's rounded towards the tip. And that adds definitely a layer of durability and edge stability. And then on top of that, you know, they bring it down to basically a zero edge, meaning it just comes right. There's no final cutting bevel. It just comes down, or the cutting bevel is extremely, extremely small. And that coupled with, you know, the heat treatment of the ZDP 189 composition, that all of that together is what's creating the incredible cutting performance. Now, you still are going to be pushing a fairly thick wedge through material, so in some cases it's not going to feel like it's gliding through as easily, but its cutting performance is going to continue for an astronomical amount of time. That's been the case with my Higo, right? So as somebody who uses theirs and has experience with these knives, I can tell you, yes, that is the case. The other steel, the YX7R, whatever that is that they use, I've never used that. Their ZDP is going to be the more performance-oriented material. If you are, putting that edge retention way up on a pedestal, that's going to be the case with this guy. So, yeah. Cool. It's just confusing why they didn't do the San Mai style VG10 clad ZDP on this. But anyways, ergonomically, it's wonderful. And you know why? It's because there's no pocket clip. It comes with, apparently, this little slip that you can attach to your belt. Put it upside down like this. Okay, I don't like to carry knives like this. I think, honestly, me personally, I'd rather deal with the pocket clip. Putting a pocket clip on this guy is definitely going to, no matter what it is, it's going to create more of a hot spot than just holding it like this. But, using this knife like this without a pocket clip is ideal. But you have to balance that with the fact that if you're going to carry it, you either have to carry it just in your pocket or it's going to be hanging outside. I mean, you could turn this to the inside. But most people are going to carry it facing outside and attached to their belt. It's just kind of weird. Kind of looks like, people who carry, and sorry if this is you, people who carry those cell phone, like they carry their smartphones on the outside of their pants in a, I know, it's like, but quick access, right? I don't know. I feel like I can reach into my pocket and get my stuff that's in my pocket just as easily. It's kind of weird. It's a nice pouch, right? I think I'd rather deal with a slight hotspot and just have a pocket clip, right? So I don't know. That's going to be something that, people are going to have to judge for themselves. There's a lanyard thing. So if you're going to carry it bare, just without this, you still want to carry it in your pocket, put a lanyard on it. All right. It doesn't really matter where the lanyard hole is because there's no pocket clip. So it's free to be prioritized. This side of the knife looks exactly the same as the front, except that this is the side for the lock. There's a little tiny bit of stick on this guy. That'll almost undoubtedly go away over time. It's not something that ever bothers me. The lockup is completely and totally solid. The blade is there a stop pin? Yeah, there is. There's a stop pin in there. So it's not bracing on the titanium. It's bracing on the stop pin. No blade play up, down, left, or right. We have no pivot lash, and we have no detent lash. Now, this blade is a little teeny tiny bit off center. And at first I thought, that's not a big deal. You probably just adjust the pivot. Well, the problem is that I don't think there is an adjustment for the pivot. I don't think. I think it's possible that you could loosen some of these handle screws and tighten them down in a different order, and maybe get the centering perfect. On mine, I took it apart and put it back together, and the centering was a bit off, so I just did the pivot adjustment and paper trick, and it was fine. You might be able to do that with this, but it's not rubbing, right? It's fine. It's just ever so slightly off of center. I don't know. You get one of these, and if it is off center, it might be a little bit more tricky to center it than, a knife with a pivot. And if you get underneath there, maybe there's something to adjust it, but I would guess probably not, given that there's no obvious liner or not. I mean, like, I can look in there again, but I was looking in there before the video and I didn't see anything that looked, it just looks like titanium in there. So I don't know, maybe you get in there and there's something in there. I'm not going to take this apart because this is somebody else's knife and it's $2,000. I'm just not going to mess with it. But it's a little bit frustrating. Even if there is, it's a little bit frustrating to have to get in there and mess with that. As it sits though, it's solid. So, final verdict, this is a really nice looking knife. It's definitely going to perform. This is definitely going to be a knife that could last you for the rest of your life easily and be passed on to the next person. Cutting performance and the materials and all of that, this thing's ready to go. I don't know why they didn't do, if that is the case, maybe I'm wrong, but every listing that I saw of this knife listed it as just ZDP and not VG10 clad. If that's the case, it's weird. Make them all VGs, especially the more expensive one. Make that one VG10 clad. That can only help it, right? Because the core is what you're using to cut, which is ZDP, and then everything else, right? That's exposed to the elements of your environment. So VG10 is going to handle that better in terms of corrosion resistance and I think toughness than ZDP. So yeah, why not? This looks cool. I'm not sure that and the Tanto Edge is worth an additional $300. And truthfully, even given all the elements of this knife, you know, I'll say this right now, I think the standard Sai is the better way to go, right? The drop point, I'd prefer that. The Prism DLC is cool, but I'll take the regular black titanium, right? For $300 less. Even then, is that a $1,600 now? I think this thing is quite a bit overpriced. I think this is, again, more like a $1,200, maybe $1,400. This would be $1,200 to $1,400 if it had the VG10 class, just based on other things that I've handled. I don't make knives, just my opinion, right? And then the Sai, I don't understand how that can be that much more expensive than where I think the Higo 2 should be at. Again, like $1,000 to $1,200. Rockstead knives are nice. They're definitely knives that should cost more than $1,000. There's an enormous amount of work that goes into them. I just have no idea what is making this type of stuff so expensive. It's just ridiculous. If you like how this knife looks, right, and you're like, I got the money for it, I just want to make sure that it's really like made well. Yeah, it's definitely made well. It's just, there's this huge amount of money where I'm just very confused as to what? This is a very confusing model. If you're gonna get one of these, go with the regular Sai. You get titanium, you get VG10 clad, ZDP 189, and you at least have the option for a drop point, which I think is gonna be better serving to the end user in the long run. In any case, Thomas, I do appreciate you sending this to me for review. This will be headed back your way. Like I said, this will be linked along with other Rockstead knives right down in the description. So if you're interested, I would appreciate you using my links, as it does support the channel, but that is entirely up to you. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.